Given the federal court decisions on health care that are kind of seesawing around, are you concerned if that law could go down and therefore take your single payer plan with it?
You know, on the short-term basis, the good news is that the health care reform money that's being allocated to the states to help us build a single exchange is not in jeopardy. But sure, I'm concerned about the health care bill going forward. It's going to give us hundreds of millions of dollars that we need to build to a new system, and we want to keep that system coming. I want to tell you that on no uncertain terms, President Obama feels the same way, and he wants to make sure that the bill goes into effect. So, you know, it's going to be a long battle, but, you know, we can't afford in Vermont to sit back and worry about what Washington might or might not do. I know I've given you these numbers, but you might not have this last one. We were spending $2.5 billion on health care 8 years ago, 10 years ago. Today we're spending over $5 billion. VISCA estimates that we'll be spending an additional $1.6 billion by 2015. $1.6 billion out of Vermonters' pockets. It's not sustainable. And I think some of the confusion in the Shao report is people look at his recommended payroll tax or whatever he comes up with for a financing mechanism and they say, wow, it seems like you're raising a lot of money. Well, his report is based upon the $1.6 billion more that we're going to be spending in 2015. My point is, we've got to get healthcare costs under control. We can't wait for the federal government. We're going to have to assume that once we pass a bill, they're going to give us the waivers, that they're going to change the date to 2014, and all we can do is push hard to make that happen so that we can create jobs and get our healthcare spending under control.
Just a quick question on the letter. In talking about the cuts, you called them draconian, you called it the Tea Party Congress. How hopeful are you that these gentlemen are going to receive this and go, oh, Governor Shumlin is concerned about our cuts, let's do a 180?
You know, I don't think they're sitting down there too concerned about what one governor says. I think the important thing is that collectively, I hope that we can make some progress at the National Governors Association to encourage Congress to find a more thoughtful way to make the transition between the help that states need and needed during the Great Recession and between balancing the federal budget. And to do it in this draconian a way is going to really hurt Vermonters and hurt all of our efforts to balance our budgets.
So are you hoping that after you go down to the NGA that there'll be some collective letter that all the governors will sign? Are you trying to reach out to your Republican counterparts to make this effort stronger? What's your goal here?
Well, obviously I want to encourage the NGA to join me in urging Congress to find a more thoughtful way to balance the budget. That's my goal going down there, one of them.
How do you feel about the proposal Kurt Wright offered this week about changing the way school contract disputes would be resolved? Switching to a system that counties have binding arbitration rather than allowing school boards to impose contract terms and school unions to strike. NEA said yesterday they were open to considering this. How do you feel?
You know, I haven't really taken a hard look at it, but you know, I think that anything that allows our school boards to focus more on quality and outcomes and less on having to negotiate annual contracts is a good thing for all of us. And I bet you school boards would be relieved too.
So does that mean you're in favor of statewide teachers' contract?
Well, you know, the statewide teachers' contract brings up other complications that I think we don't want to enter into right now. We're trying to work collaboratively with our school boards to help them, give them tools and suggestions and in a collaborative manner to reduce costs. And I got to say, I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing. Let's not forget that last year they brought in on average 0 increase across the state. That this year many of our communities are doing that again for a second year at the same time that they're facing increases in healthcare premiums, which we're trying to help them with, in fuel costs, and in obviously salaries. So I think our school board's doing a pretty good job.
Is that your sense of town meeting that budgets will be held in line?
It's going to be interesting, but according to the early indicators that I've seen, the budgets that are being presented across the state, the majority of them are 0 or 1% increases, and that's good news for all of us.
House is going to try to get your veteran tax credit to the floor, despite testimony from economists and other experts who said under no circumstances an employer is going to take on a $30,000 salary in exchange for a $2,000 tax credit. What makes you feel like this is going to actually result in hiring veterans who wouldn't have just gotten a job anyway?
Well, nothing personal, but economists are almost always wrong. That's how they get paid. I find that they're great at telling you what just happened, and they're less good at telling you what's going to happen. So with that bias, I would say this. Anyone who's hiring who gets a $2,000 tax credit is more likely to hire that individual than one for whom they don't get a $2,000 tax credit. If Congressman Welch's credit passes, there's another $2,200, so suddenly you're getting $4,200 tax credit. You're going to hire the veteran. And that's my goal, is to get our veterans back to work. So if we're hiring economists to tell us that someone who's not going to hire isn't going to be enticed by a $2,000 tax credit, I don't think you need to go to school to figure that one out. But if you're hiring and you get a tax credit, you're more likely to hire the veteran, and that's our goal.
Do you use fertilizer on your lawn?
No.
What do you think of this? The House is considering the bill to effectively ban it in some house, but
I think that we all have to make a contribution to getting the phosphorus out of our rivers and lakes. And when we talk about waterways in Vermont, we tend to talk about Lake Champlain, and Lake Champlain is incredibly important. But I grew up on the banks of the Connecticut River, and we have so much phosphorus pouring down through the Connecticut River that there's literally a dead zone of miles when the water hits Long Island Sound. So as a society, we are using more nitrogen than we should. Home lawns are a part of the problem, and I think anything we can do to encourage Vermonters to let their lawns thrive without high use of nitrogen is a good thing.
Do you support that, though?
Well, I haven't read the bill. I'm not going to comment on that, but I do think that educating people about the dangers of throwing nitrogen on a lawn, and then frankly you have to mow 2 or 3 times more often than you did before, which of course burns up fossil fuel. If we could all approach our lawns a little differently, I think we'd all be better off.
You're anti-mowing?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but it has occurred to me that when we throw nitrogen on our lawns, they grow more quickly, a lot more quickly. And then we have to mow them more frequently, and that burns fossil fuel. And, we have a challenge keeping our lakes clean, our rivers clean, and making sure that the planet's livable for future generations. We could be a lot smarter about this.
Senator Luzzi is in...
I personally would put sheep on my lawn.
Well, Senator Luzzi's in Brattleboro today.
Good terms there.
Good segue. Trying to get a sense about what Windham County will look like if Vermont Yankee closes next year. What do you think he's going to hear?
Well, there's no question that how we close Vermont Yankee is going to matter to the economy of the county where I was born and raised. And, one of the things that I tend to focus on in the next couple of weeks is how we encourage the NRC to impose upon Entergy Louisiana to keep the promise that was made to Vermonters when the plant was built, that when it was shut down, it would be returned to a green field as fast as possible. And I'm a little discouraged in conversations with the chairman recently to find that Safestore is more a determination, according to the NRC, of the owner than it is of the NRC. And I think that's something that Congress should change.
Do you fear for the vitality of Windham County were Yankee to shut down, at least in the short term?
Well, it's obviously going to have an impact, but let's bear in mind that Windham County has many aspects of a diversified economy. And, the question is, how do we make sure that when we close Vermont Yankee, we do it in a way that has the least damaging impact on the economy. And I keep saying the difference between leaving the carcass of the plant on the banks of the Connecticut River for Entergy to watch over versus keeping the promise, running the plant for 5 to 6 years, running the cooling systems of the plant for 5 to 6 years as it cools down. That's a couple hundred good-paying jobs. And then spending over $1 billion in all likelihood to decommission it. That's a lot of money in Windham County over a 10-year period. That's a ton of jobs. That's a lot of hotel rooms. That's a ton of restaurant meals. Those are good-paying jobs. So we don't have as much of a jobs challenge if the promise is kept and it's decommissioned on time. We have a much bigger jobs challenge if after 5 or 6 years of cooling off, all you have is a few security guys out there watching the carcass deteriorate. So I really think it's incredibly important if Senator Luzzi and his committee and others want to make a difference, join us in making sure that Safestore never happens.
What do you mean you're discouraged by the NRC? Or do they say it's not our problem, not our oversight?
Well, we're talking to the NRC, but I think there's a lack of clarity that the NRC, it seems to me the smart NRC policy would be to allow Safestore in situations where there are multiple plants on site. One continues to run, and obviously it's difficult to decommission a plant if there's a plant running. That's what Safestore was invented for. That's what it should be used for. To suddenly change the script and say, hey, if a company like Entergy Louisiana doesn't fill up the decommissioning fund and they decide that they want to have it magically build up over years, they can leave the carcass of the plant there. I don't think that's in the public's best interest. It's definitely not in Vermont's best interest, and the NRC ought to stand up for those that have these carcasses in their communities and say, it's our job to make sure that doesn't happen. But, this is where the rubber hits the road on this jobs question. You can have all the meetings and all the commissions you want. If they get Safestore, it's economically really tough for Windham County. If they don't, we have 16 to 18 years to still have jobs, economic activity, and transition to the reality of the closed plant. There is a huge gap there between the two. Let's use all our energy to make sure that Safestore never happens. That's in the best interest of jobs and the best interest of Windham County.
So the NRC is basically telling you, you got Safestore.
I think that, I'll be talking to our congressional delegation soon. But in conversations that I've had with the NRC recently, I think some clarity from Congress could be helpful.
The health department's getting more updates from Yankee, but have you talked to Yankee officials recently, though?
Not in the last several weeks. We're getting reports and trying to figure out exactly whether there's a leak, what the leak is, but we're still wondering.
Are you frustrated that there hasn't been more progress? Because when this all came out, Yankee said, well, it's going to take a long time to sort this out. Do you think they're dragging their heels, or do you think they're moving as quickly as they can?
It's hard for me to judge that, in fairness. All I can tell you is it would seem to me that if we have a plant that is springing really critical leaks every few months, that's letting out plumes of steam that are radioactive mysteriously, that pipes keep popping, that we might conclude that the plant is old and tired and it was designed to be shut down in 2012, and frankly there was a reason for that. So I just think it's in all of Vermonters' best interest to ensure that we get Safestore off the table, that it gets decommissioned starting in 2012, the cooling off period, and then the decommissioning, that's going to be good for jobs in Windham County, it's going to be good for Vermont, and it'll allow us to use that site in the future with all the transmission lines that run into it, huge investment there, for some other generating facility in the future. So let's stick together as a family and get this done.
Have you gotten any updates on that steam leak that happened last week?
Nothing more than what I've read in the press. It was mysterious. It happened. They're trying to figure out why. Mysterious.